Hey everyone, and welcome. I hope you're all extremely well. We're looking forward to this one this evening. Lots to bring you, and welcome to this UK drone rules update from Geeksvana. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a range of topics impacting every level of drone user in the UK. Some of the information being made available is, shall we say, clearer than others, but whatever happens in the next few months, 2025 will be a significant year for drone use in the UK. First up, we're going to be talking about the UES regulation review, which was basically carried out by the CAA in terms of a public consultation. It feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? But actually, it has a big impact on this year. In January 2024, so last year, the CAA closed their public consultation on a review of UES regulation overall in the UK. It sought to consider the changes required to make the UK drone rules more UK-centric, essentially, and evolve some of the policies and legislation. The CAA have publicly stated that they expect to provide their response to the consultation and then submit a plan to government, which is obviously what they normally do straight after a consultation, this year at some point. Now, we have had a lot of releases in the commercial side of drone use and a new government in there as well. So we can see why we haven't necessarily got to the point of finding out their proposed changes so far. However, there is a clock ticking with already extended transitional period ending at the end of 2025. So things like class markings and airspace types become something we need a little urgent attention to. So what are the options? Well, we could see a period where all of the transitional benefits and policies end, and we have a fairly restricted feeling to airspace on our hands, particularly in the open category. Without an approved class marking system, so the C labels on our drones, the UK drone user will be restricted pretty heavily. So it's unlikely, in my opinion, that that will be allowed to happen. But then again, who knows? We do have time. If it happens now, we do have time for a potential overhaul of the system, of course, with new legislation. We just about have that kind of time on our hands, but that will also need to happen soon if we're not going to need a further extension to the transitional period, allowing things like A2, CFC and A1 benefits to continue in the meantime. But that, of course, is a viable option itself. Launch the consultation into new legislation and allow for a short extension to the transitional period to actually cover it. It perhaps seems like a sensible option. The third option probably seems the most simple and is therefore sometimes the most likely, but I know it won't be particularly popular. And that is where we are within a year of significant change for drones in the UK. That would be to simply extend the existing transitional period for another chunk of time, perhaps a year or two again. This would raise some extra issues in terms of certification like the A2 CFC, but it's likely to be the most probable in some form or other. At this point, they will not be able to simply drop the refresh concept because, of course, so much currently ends at the end of 2025. So something is going to happen, and probably fairly soon. What about ideas from us? Well, Geeksvana, in terms of what might be useful, well, for me, I think an extension is likely in some form or other. They may not even call it an extension, of course, so as not to bring about a lot of changes, a brick wall, if you like, only to then to have to change the rules again. That would not be good for stability and the ease of understanding, to have rules and rules and rules change and change and change. We've been there, done that, haven't we? It might be better to extend the period again to give time for the UAS review to take place properly. But in the meantime, allow things like the use of C-label drones as originally intended under some circumstances. That would probably be a very popular move and allow both recreational and commercial users to get more from their drones here in the UK. Let's bring in Graham to see what he thinks on this one and to look at some of the other key points surrounding the UAS review, and then we'll move on to our next topics. Let's bring the man in, shall we? And I'll even remember to turn his audio on. How are you, sir? Yeah, very funny. Hilarious, absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, busy as you know with sort of doing stuff in the background, but yeah, this one's a vexed question, isn't it? I could sort of see, because they did the consultation previously, I could sort of see a hybrid where they say, okay, let's extend, but let's make some sensible and popular changes. Not popular with everybody, but I'd say things like getting the flyer ID in for every category.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
slipping that sort of thing. It's secondary legislation. It's relatively easy to put through that
it is,
level of change.
but I kind of got the sense, and of course we'll only be able to tell for sure once something happens. The feeling was within government and regulator this time that they kind of wanted to make the changes. They didn't want another sort of temporary stopgap and that type of thing, because we've kind of been there now since
Then
really
get on with
2019. Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Get heads together with user groups to really understand what's required. Consult if you need to, and do that quickly. Sort of base that around an exception of what we know are now relatively safe or very safe manufactured drones, and
yeah.
get the legislation changed.
For me, the whatever you want to call them, class marking C labels, the C label thing is something which is an easy fix and could
Yeah,
actually get around so many problems, because of course a lot of our current regulatory system is based on C labels working, isn't it? Basically,
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
it's something that
And
it wouldn't take too much, because of course it's already technically within UK legislation, so it would be more. It wouldn't even be secondary legislation. They could even deal with it through a policy, frankly.
yeah, you could walk away from the sort of jingoistic, it must have been tested in the UK. You know, that
Yes.
which is what it was. That's all it was,
Yeah.
and all it did was hobble us and leave us where we are now, which is, you know, looking fondly across the channel and seeing people fly drones in ways we'd like to be flying them.
Yes, there you go. Sean speaks French live on air. That's the only piece of
So I
French
thought
I
you
know.
needed
But
a
yeah,
toilet.
yeah. Putting my hand up.
And if they do go out consultation, I think we ought to ask folk flying in the specific category what they feel about the non-fatality clause and whether or not that's proportionate and necessary.
Risk is a
Uh,
big thing, isn't it? Because
know the answer.
as you were
Yeah,
saying as well, we've now had another couple of years of it's been what, it's been 4, nearly 5 years of us flying drones in the open category, many of them
yeah,
over people and close to people, without any kind of. I think some people expected there to be some kind of big issue when suddenly sub 250-gram drones are allowed to fly over people in congested areas with pretty much no
yeah.
competency, read the manual and register it. Didn't even have to have a flyer ID. And we haven't had the wave of problems that I think some people expected we might get. So the risk factor has to be reorganized, doesn't it? I mean, I know, as
It,
you say, in the specific category, we've got this thing about the death, the potential of causing death with a drone. And in the open category, we've kind of just thrown lots more data at it whilst we've been in this literal transition period, to show just how safe drone use is. And that's not just
and
camera drone use, that's FPV, that's everything else. There's lots of drone
yeah,
stuff happening more and more every day, even compared to now to even to 2020. Because of
yeah,
the sub 250-gram boom, there are so many drones being flown out there by people that don't necessarily even know all of the rules. But yet we
yeah.
haven't had any, we haven't had masses of problems, shall we say.
No, no. There have been some, but there have not been. Yeah, certainly hasn't been the problems I thought there'd be. And if you look back a few years, I sort of think that that's where the regulators are. They're still looking at data and basing reliability on stuff that, you know, perhaps I started flying back in 2016. But you know that we had this report in from the Netherlands the other day, this white paper where they're showing that they have evidence, you know, proper evidence, firm data that shows that the likelihood of a flyaway is magnitudes less than Jarris and Sora think it is, and that's what the
Well,
regulations are being based on.
yes, but you've always got that lag, haven't you? Because again, we're back in 2020 when these new rules were coming in. These, of course, have been worked on for several years before, and it's very difficult for a regulator and for a government
Yeah,
to pivot quickly on something like risk, because if they go the wrong side of that line, then all hell will break loose, basically politically and
but they
everything else like
seem to
that.
be on the same line they were at
That's exactly what we
going
need
on
to
for
see
10 years
move
ago.
forward, isn't it? In terms of this
Yeah,
next this next wave that happens, this is such an important year for drones in the UK in terms of regulation.
And the government keep banging onto industry about productivity. This is a measure of their productivity. How quickly can they respond to changes in technology? Because if they hold industry back with waiting for them to catch up, we just get dragged back.
Yeah,
In fact, if they
absolutely.
drag us back far enough, it makes it look like they're the ones in getting in the lead of things, and they clearly aren't in this case.
No, and it's one of those things where, okay, we kind of had to go along with with the other 26, 27 member states and form the EASA rules, etc. And there were
Yeah.
some good things and bad things, and some things that we thought that doesn't really suit the UK. And the consultation, which, as some people in the chat have said, kind of feels like a long time ago. Well, it was technically years ago now. It's actually, you know, one of the focuses there was the fact that we can now make it UK centric. We can now make it UK focused. Well, that gives us, as well as obviously it means that there is more, not more risk for the regulator, but obviously the UK as a state stands alone with the risk. So we can't spread it across all the member states anymore and say, hey, but all these other people agreed to us when we did this.
Yeah.
But that does give us the flexibility as a one-off nation to, and a small, relatively small nation geographically, to be able to actually put something quite innovative together. And, you know, really open up the world of drones, basically. So hopefully, you know, it was it a different time? Have things changed so much since 2023 that now I feel so much more negatively towards the regulation side of things? That felt so much more hopeful.
I can't think what may have driven that.
I can't think how that could have happened. But one of the things I do think is going to change in this next range, particularly with the open category, is privacy. It was one of the threads that sort of went through the consultation. It was mentioned a few times in roundabout ways, but then once more directly. And I do think we're potentially going to see, because there have been more complaints from landowners, and we're not just talking about the good old audit channels here, but, you know, privacy is something which is a bit of a hot potato that's come up with drones. And I think the general public have been slightly surprised, shall I say, in terms of just how much freedom that they view that. You know, landowners that I've read articles on, etc., don't believe that somebody can fly a drone over their land. Now, of course, there's a big difference between flying a drone over at a reasonable height on the way somewhere or off to do a mission, etc., over private land, and stopping and hovering and recording and coming down. In, you know, but of course we have lots of other laws already in place to trigger those kind of things. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with privacy, because obviously some countries, some nations, even on top of their EASA rules, have gone in some quite dramatic directions. You look at Sweden, Finland, etc., who, of course, especially Finland, have some very unique defence issues. But, you know, the privacy rules for open category recreational drone flight are really high. And even in New Zealand, as we hear from Bruce down there in his videos often, that you know, flying over private land isn't allowed there at the moment in the open category without their permission. So obviously there's enforcement comes into that, but I think privacy is going to be an issue and I think that's going to be where we're probably going to get our wings clipped the most in this next wave of regulation, personally.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because as a country, we don't have many privacy rules. We really, it's a very open country from that point of view. And I'd hate to see that change. I had a little ponder before the show, and I thought, how could you get around some of the problems? And obviously, if you fly over a place once, you're not necessarily causing a nuisance in law, because nuisance generally what likes to see repeated behavior. But I wonder if you were an individual who could be proven to have flown over a place and caused an issue in a number of places, if that could be looked at the same way, and somebody could gather those together in aggregate and say this person is a nuisance not to one person but to many, and that makes them a nuisance.
Are you trying to come up with an auditor law there, Graham?
I'm coming up with a law against people who may cause a nuisance in a number of places. I'm just trying to solve the
If
problem
those
without
people
every,
happen to be auditors, then
if they
you
happen
see,
to be, that's a
I
function
think
of what they're on.
the auditor issue is being solved by police and being solved by existing legislation already. So I don't think it's even now an issue that it used to be. It's just a very popular YouTube niche, which is great for those creators.
And to be fair, I don't think it's a huge issue. I think if you
No,
count up the
but I think privacy in general. There's been quite a few stories recently, quite a few things that happen in the press where people seem to be very shocked as to the permissions that Droneflight has. Ironically, I think one of the things that could bring privacy in very much into the fore for us in drones in the UK is things like drone delivery, etc. Because if you look at some of the trials that have been happening
yeah,
across the world, privacy has been one of the issues that people have thrown back at Amazon and at Wing. And you know, there's now 2 major trials that have stopped early on privacy concerns and privacy complaints. So it's something I think we need to be aware of, and we need to be wary of, and therefore I suppose, you know, still continue to fly responsibly, because we don't get privacy complaints, because half the time when most of the people watching this, most people are flying their drones and they are flying over private land, those people have no idea, because it's over their land for a couple of seconds and gone again, and it's at 300 feet, so you know they're not going to hear
yeah,
a mini at
you
that
wouldn't
level,
know.
etc. So yes, it's
And,
only an
and,
issue for
and
the people
those,
causing an issue.
yeah, and those flights should be able to carry on because they are not it shouldn't be a privacy concern.
No,
If you're flying
exactly.
over with a mini drone, you know, there's nothing you can capture that should be a privacy concern. That can't
No.
be that, and I'll come to the Google Earth thing that can't be got from Google Earth. I know the dates and all the rest of it, but essentially, you know, if you have a house
I don't
with
know.
entrances,
I don't agree with
unless
that.
you change them every month.
Yeah, because of course the problem with the drone flight is it's live data. It's what's happening right now. It shows
Yep,
those people
it is.
walking around and that type of thing. And whereas Google Earth, it is much more sanitized. And of course, you can get anything blurred on Google Earth in
But
minutes.
it's showing dots moving around. It's not showing individuals
Again,
moving.
yes,
Yeah.
if flown responsibly, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, oh,
If you're doing it
absolutely.
right, then yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with you.
if you're flying high, then sorry, if you're flying
Flying
low,
high could be
I mean, you
misinterpreted.
yeah.
Right.
If you're yeah, if you're flying sensibly, you should be allowed to fly sensibly.
Indeed, exactly. We'll move on to the next section, because this is definitely one that's going to turn Graham's red face redder, frankly. And this is actually some breaking news, and the scheme of charges has been published by the CAA, and it's a bit of a shame. It does include the price hike for PDRA 01. Let me just bring that up here, which is now bringing the application fee up to £500. The justification offered by the CAA remains that you can now get a permission quickly, rather than the, I think, 16 days average was what they were quoting that it was before. Now, keeping in mind that, of course, no paperwork or ops manual is actually now checked on this new system, so you're kind of getting none of the oversight for double the money, essentially. So anyone can now gain an authorization without any oversight whatsoever, using the CAA's own data in terms of audit. You could be 3 years down the line before you have any actual oversight. Now, that's something which concerns me personally. That is what happens when the CAA really asks the question, is asked to do their job, essentially. They decide to charge us double for doing less. Is that really where we're sat at right now? Let's just see how red Graham's face is is growing in the background there. But this is of course something that is subject to an entire series here on Geeksvana. There's lots of videos on this topic. This is the breaking news that we were expecting, and I do have an update on the CAA series complaint news story later in this show. But speaking specifically about this, it's one of the things that we're told we asked for, but can we find anywhere anybody actually asking for it?
And well, if yeah, I've got freedom of information requests in the process, trying to find out answers. We know that several meetings took place with a group that I set up, and there was only one meeting, and it was nothing to do with this consultation. So we know they've lied about that, and I'm doing some checks to see if they're lying about other conversations they had. We really don't know. Somebody must have been in the room when they were talking about the costs of this, because consulting on a system is no good unless you consult on the costs as well. It's no good me saying, would you like a car? Yes. Would you like this one? Oh, it's a Rolls Royce. Yes, I would. Drive away in it, and then I send you the bill for it. You might realize that perhaps you'd sort of overreached yourself a little bit. And that's where we are with this. Apparently the industry asked for all this. Apparently, this is what I was told on Monday by a CAA representative. The industry asked for this. The CAA spec'd it based on what industry had asked for, and this is the cost of it. But at no point did they say, if you have this, it will cost you this.
Yes.
Is that okay? And that's the covenant you should have.
Indeed. And of course, even based on that, which is something that we've had back via email, and obviously you heard it as recently as this week directly, but it isn't actually even answering the question that they said industry posed, or the requests made by industry, because of course, if industry were asking for a quicker turnaround, that's what they're looking for, a quicker turnaround, not just remove all of the oversight whatsoever.
Yeah.
And just give an automatic OA, hoping that their ops manual is correct and hoping that they're doing things correctly. It just, I mean, is it the case, therefore, are the CAA in doing this admitting there is no risk to drone flight? Because we've gone from a system needing your ops manual to be clawed over even for things like font changes and everything else, to suddenly no kind of oversight beyond your GVC training. Crack on, just as long as you obviously sign to say you've got these things on file. There's no kind of oversight to see if you're doing things properly. I mean, so therefore they must have now reassessed that there's no risk whatsoever to drones, surely.
Absolutely, yeah. It's clear that if there was such high risk to the extent of, now things like getting your company name wrong, I sort of go along with, because there are legal things about insurance, company names, who's actually got the permission, who's operating, all that's fine. Fonts, wrong issue, wrong data against something. No, I'm sorry, that isn't the same level as, you say, fonts and people and all of that was apparently safety critical, to the extent that your OA would be put on hold until you got that stuff right. And now you don't even have to show them the manual, which the month before they would have had to have gone over the fine-tooth comb. All we wanted as an industry was some certainty. That's all any industry wants. If you know it's going to take 6 weeks and it takes 6 weeks, you can plan around that.
Yeah.
What you don't want is it will take 6 weeks and it will be looked at and picked over to a ludicrous extent that becomes meaningless. And they actually got good towards the end. They got good at saying, yes, here's your OA, please correct these things. That's the way it should have been. And what they should have had is competent people doing that job competently. They never seem to get that balance right.
Well,
and
yes.
Yeah.
Just a very quick one from the chat. Amok's just mentioning that the moderators are going a bit up over time. I've actually looked through the chat and there's been no moderation. There's been nothing removed or changed in terms of anything, because what we tend to get on the live shows, we get something which will be held if it's got something which YouTube thinks might be controversial, and then we basically assess that. But there's nothing else in here. Just so you know, perhaps you can let me know what you've seen that makes you think that was happening. But yeah, there isn't anything there. And Dan's saying, I've had messages to the chat just not appear, Sean. The only thing that gets auto-blocked on the live chats is links, or unless you are saying some of the words that I thought Graham was about to say when he said I thought something was coming. But yeah. Also, as Autistic AF is saying, click live chat at the top just to make sure that you're seeing things. But yeah, there's nothing being blocked here, so that's really interesting. If more than one person is noticing that that's going on, strange one. But right, so we're going to move on to the next topic on this show, because we do have a few updates to bring you, which is always fun, and we're going to be talking about the fact that the CAA obviously recently put out a statement in terms of PDRAs not having any changes to them in the next year whilst Sora is bedded in. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about this recently, and it is surrounding that statement, or I suppose actually it's more of an update on the launch of Sora, and that it will how that will impact existing PDRA users, operational authorization holders. Much has been made of the fact that there will be no changes to PDRA for a year, and that is somehow a good thing for users. This seems to me to ring a little bit hollow, personally. Frankly, it seems that delaying changes to existing authorization holders is something that actually suits the CAA more than the OA holders. If they attempted to make the clean break and back their new Sora policies from day one, it would likely lead to another significant cliff moment for PDRA holders in terms of numbers, and that's what I think is there. The already dwindling numbers would likely fall significantly if all of those users needed to jump through the Sora hoops now. Delaying this, in my opinion, just my opinion, only really helps the CAA in making the release seem more smooth and bump-free than it actually is. This is further emphasized by the CAA's recent campaign to get OSC holders, so the next level up, to renew their permission before their 12-month period ends, so they can get them through on the existing permission system. All of this can only represent can kicking for the end user, with alleged stability for a few more months. This does not give anyone confidence to plan their business on a more medium-term basis, in my opinion, and the support shown by some for this announcement is as close to gaslighting as I've really seen recently. Instead of warning the regulator that simply moving the problem will not help the users, it is never easy to deal with the regulator, but open support of such a one-sided decision is a strange one. And I just don't get why people are so excited and actually thinking, hey, another year of us not getting any changes. I mean, am I wrong, Graham? Does this feel right to you?
I don't think so. I mean, we don't yet know the full implications of changing to the Sora-based risk assessment. So this is a risk assessment that the CAA will do, and they will apply Sora to what is currently CAP 722H, the sort of heat map method that we used to. And the implication is that will change the permission. And I think we all know where we're going with that in terms of bubbles and cylinders, perhaps. So, yeah, does it do any good to know that in 12 months' time it won't be worth having as an option? You'll have to go to a Sora, which, you know, you think the price is £500, but actually, if you want to do the same sort of things you're doing now, that could be £2,000, £4,000, £6,000, because you need to go down the Sora route. That's nothing to hang a business on today, is it?
No, and you know, being presented as, hey, this is a great thing, PDRA isn't going to be messed around with for a year. But of course, I genuine and couple that with OSC holders being actively. I mean, when did the CAA actively chase their? I'm sure some OSC holders were probably surprised to get an email at all from them. Frankly, I'm being slightly negative there, but anyway, comms isn't necessarily the strongest point with their existing holders. So to be actively chased to put their applications in early, and of course, you know. There are other implications to that in terms of them planning their year already. I don't see this as a positive. All they're trying to do is stop another cliff in terms of authorizations, and knowing that the numbers are just going to drop off. So what's going to happen now is we're going to get what looks like a smooth rollout of Sora, although that's still in question, of course. I speak very... Yeah.
Are we talking relative terms here, Sean?
Sorry, yes. Sorry. Professional. But what would certainly be a smoother course than it would have been if everybody would have had to move over to Sora sooner than that. So although great, yeah, I think any amount of time where people can carry on running their businesses in the way they are now is a good thing, of course. But I don't necessarily think it's some kind of, you know, wonderful thing that the CAA have done for PDRA holders, because I think it suits them more than anybody else, basically, and that's just a personal opinion.
What would be more wonderful would be, if you like, say, yes, we're looking at Sora, but actually in the case of PDRA 01, we have lots and lots and lots of evidence of nobody being killed, and lots and lots of evidence of numbers of flights, and therefore we will take a view that says these are the permissions under PDRA 01 under a different version. So there's multiple ways to skin a cat. You're the regulator. Just do the right thing. get it right and allow the industry to carry on doing safely what it's been doing safely, and what it will continue to do more safely because the technology moves on and gets safer and safer every year.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Couldn't
are we
agree
going to
more.
put another red flag with a man walking? Previously, at the moment, we've got a red flag walking in front of the car. I think what the CAA are planning to do is take a mallet to the guy's kneecaps, and then he can hobble in front of your car.
Do you know,
No, it's
some
not.
of your descriptors are so concerning to me. Were you once a heavy enforcer for the mob? You know, come on now. I'm definitely. I'm kind of glad I'm not in any way, shape, or form in any of your meetings that you manage, as a very successful director that you are. Because boy, I think some of the explanations and the friendly advice that you give
Oh,
might be a little bit
well,
concerning.
funnily enough, for the people I work with normally, there's no reason to get like this because there's no,
You see, everybody.
people I work with, I'm used to performing.
Absolutely. See, everybody, there's no reason to get like this.
Yeah,
I'm
there's no
scared. Are you?
need.
I'm scared personally. I think we're going to move on to the next one.
I'm a pussy cat. I am a pussy cat.
Yeah. Okay. Meow. Pussycats get very big and aggressive as well, actually, of course. But before we move on to the next topic, can the over 180 people currently watching, thank you for joining us, all hit the like button should you feel like it will be nice. And it makes me smile when the like button gets hit, so thank you very much. There's a little button that, no, I won't say there's a little button that gives me pleasure, because that sounds like
Yeah,
a very different show, doesn't it, basically? So
you
let's move
call
on.
me. Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next topic? And that is actually that there is been a recent safety notice issued by the CAA around firmware updates. This is from a few occurrences, but it also raises a few issues that we would like to discuss in this show today. Firstly, let's take a look at the safety notice itself and then discuss the implications with Graham in terms of what it could actually mean, shall we? So we've had this has been an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously we get these little safety notices, of course, popping up on Skywise, and it is something that we need to take a decent amount of notice of, because we could be held to this at some point as people out there operating our drones. And as it says, recipients are asked to ensure that this information notice is copied to all members of the staff who may have interest in the information. So yes, that's probably us flyers. And yes, sure enough, there you go, remote pilots, all remote pilots. So introduction, the purpose of the safety notice is to highlight the responsibility of a UAS operator and remote pilot to ensure that software and firmware updates are carried out to UAS when required by the manufacturer, or published maintenance procedures adopted and accepted by the operator. Now the scope, the CAA are aware of loss of control events in which improper handling of software and or firmware updates have been a contributing factor to the event. This safety notice is this safety notice to US operators and remote pilots to flight test the unmanned aircraft after any update or modification. And the regulatory requirements, the SpecCat operators in the SpecCat are reminded of their responsibilities under 0501HI, which obviously states, as a minimum, define maintenance instructions and employ adequately trained and qualified maintenance staff, which of course Graham has a whole team of maintenance staff for his drones. Remote pilots in the specific
I've got two hands, yeah.
Remote pilots in the specific category are reminded of their responsibilities under Spec 1C. Spec 0601C, responsibilities of the pilot, be familiar with manufacturer's instructions provided by the manufacturer of the UAS. And in the open category, which of course affects so many more of our viewers and obviously the many hundreds of thousands of pilots out there, remote pilots in the open category are reminded that their responsibilities under Open 0602E, responsibilities of the remote pilot, operate the UAS in accordance with manufacturer's instructions provided by the manufacturers, including any applicable limitations. So this is an interesting one, because obviously here we have the 060 responsibilities, and there'll be links to all of this in the description after the show, should you wish to go and have a look at them. And should you enjoy reading a regulation, which I feel sorry for you if that's you, but there we go. But this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's obviously designed towards safety. it's obviously designed towards, and everybody wants to be safe. So obviously, it's good to see the system working from that point of view. But what are the actual implications of this? Because when I read that, and when I read that in terms of ensuring manufacturer firmware is updated to their standards, etc., is this effectively saying that we shouldn't be using third-party apps like Litchi, etc.? Is it something that we need a little bit more clarification on? It's an interesting one, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah. I mean, essentially, you mentioned Litchi. We both dived in, didn't we, to some DJI instruction manuals just to see exactly what it says and the wording. And yeah, it's, you should be using the Fly app, and it
The
is
fly app
pretty
should be connected to the aircraft when you're
should be
flying,
connected to the aircraft
and
when
you
you're
should
flying. Yeah.
update at every opportunity. And obviously,
Yeah.
that led us down a few rabbit holes, essentially, didn't it? Of saying, okay, well, are they now? Are they not now saying, but are they reiterating that? Which is something which, because there's a lot of, as I've said in our last show, there's a lot of rules and regulations that are not enforced. That actually, if they
Yeah.
enforced every little thing, we probably wouldn't be able to fly our drones very much at all. But in actual fact, this is something which is interesting because they're issuing a safety notice on it in 2025. So I think it's something that probably needs a bit of clarity, because I doubt they mean to ban any kind of third-party apps, because of course on the enterprise side of things, there's lots of highly competent apps that are being used every day up and down the country,
Yeah.
that help with innovation, that are obviously very good, and are essential for the operations like mapping, etc., that those carry out. Even some, of course, formerly from DJI, etc. So
Yeah.
I doubt they mean what exactly how you can interpret this, but it's something that I think needs a bit more clarity. Do you agree?
It does. And again, I've had a situation where it was the first update I carried out on my Inspire One. So I did the right thing, and then I test flew it, and the first thing it did was it went up and it didn't want to come down. I mean, I felt like I was hanging off the stick to bring it down, and it just came down very reluctantly. And there was a problem, and within a week, so I rewound the previous version, and within a week, DJI had chucked that one and put out a new one, which solved that problem. And yes, they do say you should go and test it, but actually, an awful lot of professional operators will not do an update until they've looked at the community tabs, seen if others have done it, and whether or not they've had any problems. We've had things like early updates on the Inspire 2s where batteries were starting to do their own update when the drone was in the sky. And the last part of the update is to switch everything off. And that didn't end well. So, updating and assuming that's okay. And you could have gone and test flown that update and it would have worked perfectly. And then you bring it down again, go and take it on a job, and it would have crashed.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
this is why, funnily enough, professionals who operate every day sometimes know some little tricks to make sure that they don't crash on a regular basis. But
Yeah.
who am I to know? It will be nice to know the data on which this is based, as ever.
Yeah, and of course, user occurrences happen, flyaways happen, etc., and they feel that it's somewhere could be down to either out of date firmware or wrong firmware being used. So
Yeah.
hence a safety notice. But behind that safety notice, there has to be some kind of thought towards enforcement and saying, okay, if you're saying that, is this the interpretation we should be taking? If my drone crashes and I've done X, Y, and Z to it, and it's got different firmware running on there, is that now automatically something that is going to be enforced more under this legislation or not, basically? So I think it's something that is, it needs clarity. Perhaps it will come with future clarity on things like, I don't know, PCNs and that type of thing, and other things that are being worked on from the enforcement side of things. But it's going to be interesting to see, because I think obviously,
Yeah.
because the other thing as well is like how on earth, it would take forensic investigation to find out what firmware is running, etc., and that type of thing, in my opinion, as well, because you could have the updated phone app on your phone and just have not connected that app at that point. We could have connected it and disconnected it and then reconnected it. There's so much there that I think would be a nightmare in terms of enforcement. But it's an
Well,
interesting one.
it is an interesting one. It's nice that the CAA is taking full responsibility for for, for firmware that I upload, which isn't very
Mm.
good, but I've done as I'm told rather than what I would prefer
Yeah, I
to
mean,
do, which is
some
look at
some
industry experience.
yeah, exactly. Some people in the chat are saying, well, things like the Potensic firmware isn't very good in terms of the officially released version. And I've had drones like that before. Parrot wasn't always the best updates when they came out and needed time to bed in, shall we say? So yeah, it's one of those. So right, we'll move on to the next topic, and this one is concerning BVLOS and licenses in terms of airwaves transmission. So the CAA and Ofcom have released a joint statement to announce a key step in BVLOS. And Ofcom release here reads, bring that up here very quickly. Okay, so these safety devices, universal access transceivers, make other aircraft aware of a drone's position. They are required for some important applications, for example, enabling innovation and efficiency in managing critical infrastructure. With this equipment, drones can, for instance, inspect wind turbines and power lines to see if repairs are actually needed. This new authorization will be incorporated in our existing drone license from today. That's Ofcom's. Most consumer drones do not need any Ofcom license as they typically use license exempt spectrum. However, most commercial or advanced users, especially those wanting to use drones at long distances, need a license from Ofcom and therefore likely from the CAA as well. The 978 megahertz spectrum is used for drones internationally, and in the UK, these frequencies have been shared between aeronautical use and low power radio microphones in program making and special events since 2016. So from today, we will no longer license 978 spectrum for PMSC users in outdoor settings, but they continue to use them indoors. And we are expanding the range of other frequencies that are available to PMCE users. So an interesting one. And I think it's something that is obviously going to support BVLOS. Now, it's important to stress, of course, that we are talking about the transmission here. And we're talking frequencies. This is not a £75 because it costs £75 for the annual fee, although the license is infinite, so you don't have to renew it. You have to keep paying the fee. But that's all that it's giving you is the license to use that, and the license itself is the guidance notes are something like 40 to 50 pages long. This is not an easy route for us to all start flying BVLOS. This is part of a complex system and authorizations that you also require from the CAA. This is still as complex as it was. It's just making that complex setup a little bit more realistic. Basically, it's real world benefits coming into the sort of future flight side of things, isn't it? Really, from the BVLOS point of view.
Yeah, and again, this is one where I sort of agree with some in the industry where actually, if we knew where all manned aviation, or let's say BVLOS aviation was as well, if we knew where they all were, then we could easily avoid them and take steps to do that. So if this is transmitting and it's on a BVLOS drone, that's wonderful, as long as everybody else is looking out for that and able to pick it up. It's just as important that other drone operators can see it, I guess, because it's, if your drone gets in the way of one of these units, you could take it down and there's a ground risk. There seems to be always a lot of thought about the air risk with these things.
There is, and of course, wider than this announcement is all of the factors in terms of UTM and that kind of thing. Because of course, the only really regular BVLOS application that you can make at the moment is for the atypical airspace environment, the AAE, which is a policy. Of course, it's an authorization from the CAA rather than being based in legislation. So it's interesting how all of that is going to come together in the future and how they will solve things like UTM, because at the moment with AAE, the part of the ground risk, i.e., as you're saying, avoiding other drones, so i.e., legally flown consumer drones, is kind of assuming the consumer drone is going to fly legally as kind of part of the mitigation, and that's not practical. I feel in the modern world, shall we say. of drone use, and not everybody flies within
I
visual
don't
line
know
of sight.
I don't know what you're saying there.
Um,
What you suggesting?
I would perhaps hazard that more people fly BVLOS already than fly VLOS.
Fly VLOS, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. You're probably right. Yeah,
but on that, I do think that we need to start looking at it in terms of the real world risks and issues that are there, because actually, otherwise, bringing future flight in through this kind of route could actually end up bringing more problems that actually never existed through standard drone use to begin with, basically. So.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
something we need to be careful of, but I'm widely supportive of this move because it is opening up BVLOS for people that need it. But it'll be interesting to see how it all dovetails in. It's one piece of a very complicated pie, shall we say? That's coming
Whether
down
it's
there.
whether it's the right route, or if in 10 years' time everybody be looking back and saying, "Oh, do you remember that 978 thing? That never worked either, did it?"
Does that ever happen? No, that
No,
never happens, surely. Okay,
no.
we'll move on to the next topic, which is actually an update from us in terms of the CAA annual accounts and complaints series story. And I want to say thank you to everyone who sent in responses from the CAA and MPs, the responses they got back regarding the issues surrounding really CAA competence. Sadly, much of the response from the CAA is, as we fully expected, typical of their recent public communications. As is also typical of CA communications, there are highly concerning issues actually raised within the replies that we've seen as well, which is always blows my mind. We did not expect any other type of response, so we got the response that we thought would be happening, but this is still an important step in ensuring that we hold them accountable for their own actions. So thank you for everybody that has done that. And it's something about getting the response you expected, but we still have to tick that box, and it is still important for us to offer the opportunity to respond to the drone community and the wider public. And there's going to be an update on our continued work to bring more light to the issue and other areas that this story has actually pulled our focus towards. Gives you a little hint. So keep an eye on the channel in the coming weeks for those stories. It's far from over, but it's going to be an interesting road, because obviously any of these roads of actually getting anybody to admit anything's happened is so long, as so many other campaigners realise. And we've got a number of routes to getting at the truth in terms of getting that truth out publicly of the situation, which are still active. And I also want to give those time to work as well. It is important that we do not simply drop this. So far, it has all gone to the expected route, basically. Well, I don't think we necessarily expected a falling on the sword moment, did we, to these complaint letters?
Yeah, I was about to say it would have been nice, but
Liked,
actually
expected,
thought of people falling on swords isn't a nice one, but mind you, neither's hobbling blokes with red flags. But yeah, I mean, I've just checked my phone to have a little look at a response I got to a Freedom of Information, which has been delayed. They're actually in delay responding to this one because they either deliberately or accidentally got confused by their own Freedom of Information referencing numbering system. So they're actually in delay now. So what I must do this week is actually chase up with the ICO and report the fact that they're in delay and breaking the laws of freedom of information. What a surprise! And that one is to get into the detail of the consultation that took place with individual users rather than with the groups of users that they did or didn't talk to.
Exactly, and it's a good example of the many streams we have out there which are currently working their way through the mountains to get to the river. But we have to give these things time, but it's still ongoing, and there's a lot more information coming out. It's interesting because we're already expecting certain responses. When those responses come, they actually end up telling us a lot more than you would necessarily think. So thank you again for everybody that's done that and been so proactive on that side of things. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
It
I think it's the most. I would say it's probably the most active we've seen the community on anything. In terms of number of responses and the people actually chasing stuff up and really getting behind it. I think it's fantastic and very encouraging.
And thank you to Simon, thank you to Mark and others who have helped on the online side of things in the groups.
Yeah.
And yeah, Simon Stickland, etc., who really helped support it. There will be more we need you to do very soon in the coming weeks. But as I say, we always play the long game, because that is where the tenacity and just keeping at it really does yield results in the end, basically. Because unfortunately, those that are putting the wool over some people's eyes at the moment are not so good at the medium and long term games. So we will see what happens. Excellent. Okay, well, that's everything we have for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate everyone coming out and supporting the channel. Those are the updates that are coming in 2025. I think it's going to be a really big year for drone use in the UK. I think overall it should end relatively okay if you're not a PDRA holder, if you're not someone trying to apply for a Sora, if the proof in the pudding on that side of things with Sora, etc., is going to be these CAA webinars that are coming out very, very soon. I mean, it's within the next couple of weeks, isn't it? So that's going to be the next acid test, isn't it, really, Graham, from the point of view of finding out. This is one of the first times that we've seen the CAA come out with new policies and new authorizations like this, and adopting new methodology, and actually coming out to explain it. We think, obviously, we don't know if these are going to be, webinars or webinars. So even the format that they take when we press play and watch them is going to be fascinating to see in terms of whether they actually explain it or not.
And if there's a chat function, which, if any, questions they choose to answer.
Yes, exactly. So that's going to be the next stage in terms of Sora, etc., and seeing how that happens. Because of course, I would love to come back after those webinars and say, wow, that's really blown me out of the water. This is fantastic news for industry. They've really got their ducks in a row. Let's get behind this and build an industry through the new Sora methodology. And I hope that will be what we'll come back with. We'll have to wait and see. But until next time, I will say Sean out, and I will give Graham the last word.
Keep a little eye out for things that I might be posting on social media. That's all I'll say.
Is that anything to do with us?
It might be to do with us, yes.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.